guys doing? Good morning, I like that. Welcome to RE.THINK Church. We are glad you're here this morning. My name is Roland, and I'm one of the leaders here. If you are new with us, if you're a visitor, we would love to get to know you, connect with you, hear your story. So there's a couple ways you can do that. You can meet us in the guest services area. We have a gift for you. Gummy worms?
Gummy worms.
You know, Albanese? Yeah. Nice. And they're fresh, so. Or you can text 219-233-2311. We would love, again, to hear your story, to connect with you, and let you be known here at RE.THINK. We had a blast here Friday. If you were here Friday for Christmas in the Ville, we have a couple pictures. We were in the Christmas spirit. So we have a couple pictures from Friday. That is, look at his height right there.
Yeah.
We had karaoke. It was a good time. Photo booth. We had all kinds of stuff going on. So it was a great time Friday. If you were here, we had millions and millions of families come through. Like, countless number. This place was packed.
Yeah.
So it was really, all the popcorn was gone. So all the hot chocolates. It was a good night. So I want to encourage you guys. We invited those people who came. We invited them to come back for our Christmas Eve service. So we have some little cards in the back. If you guys could take 2 or 3 of those cards and pray over someone you know and invite them and give them this card. We would love for them to come on Christmas Eve and worship with us as they prepare for the Christmas Day with their family and friends. The cards are right in the back there. And we're going to move to a time where we talk about our tithe and offering. So if you're new with us, you can take a break. We're not going to dig deep in your wallets right now. But later we're coming. Tithe and offering. The reason we get to do a lot of what we do here at RE.THINK is because you guys are so giving. You are so obedient with the money that God gives you, the careers, the jobs you have, surrendering that back to God. That's why we get to do a lot of the things we do here. So there's a couple ways you can give. You can write a check or give cash to the black box there in the back, or you can go to rethink.cc and click the Give tab, and that's another way to give. And again, your obedience and surrender of your wallet to God is why we get to have joy when we do certain events here at RE.THINK, so we appreciate that. And we also have adopted 8 students from the Merrillville schools. So these are students who may be less fortunate, or students that we have the opportunity to bless this Christmas. And personally, I was one of those kids growing up. I had church people buy me gifts growing up, or we weren't going to have gifts. So, and I still remember those church people. And so it means a lot. So these students, there's 8 names out there. If you guys would like to adopt one of those students and make their Christmas a little brighter, God, put a smile on God's face, right? and their faces. So we appreciate that. And we're preparing for the Christmas season, so we're going to talk about some of our favorite gifts we got for Christmas. My wife got me a beat machine. I love music and like making beats. And there's this thing where it's just making beats and has pads and all this stuff. Well, if you're into that, I love it. That's so much fun, man. It was a shock because I did not think she was going to get it. Put on the credit card, though. You know how that goes. So I'm going to have Taylor and Carson come up right now. And they're going to share some of their favorite Christmas gifts.
So my name's Carson. So my favorite Christmas present that I've gotten was probably, my parents get us nutcrackers every year. I don't know, but it's been a tradition for like 8 years probably. So that's my favorite Christmas gift that I get every year.
Taylor. Look at perfect timing.
I know.
God is here, people.
Yes.
Hi everyone. So my favorite Christmas present was a guitar that my dad got me. Because growing up, I was really into music. I love singing. I have a clarinet. I play the piano. And he heard me talking about it one time. And he said, well, he didn't say, but he delivered it to my house. And I was really surprised because I had never gotten a gift from him before. It was just like cards, and we called and stuff. Sorry. So I was ready. So it just showed how much he loved me and how much he cared for me, because he had saved up all of his money just to give me that gift. And it meant a lot to me, and I still have it today. So that's my favorite gift.
Thank you, guys. Give them a round of applause. So we're going to move into our message time, and we just pray that you guys open your hearts and minds to what God has in store for you this morning and lean into the message Mark has.
Hey, good morning. Welcome to church. My name is Mark, the pastor of our church. It'll be 5 years in January, we started our church. My family moved from Michigan, and we just said, hey, let's start a church in a community we know 0 people in. That sounds like a great idea. So we did that, and it's been a great time. And Christmas in the Ville has been one of those fun things that we've done. And I don't know if you guys knew, like, this whole thing of COVID happened, and we were like, we had to put on pause and all that. And so we've been doing this. And so part of what we've jokingly talked about in the last couple of weeks is that we're going to do, as we get ready for Christmas, we're going to talk about Jesus and prepositions. Because I know a lot about English and grammar. I don't even care about the rules of stuff. So I'm just like, why does it have to be there? Where does a comma really go? And all that. So, but what I've been really working through is this idea of prepositions and how that matters and how we interact with God really does crucially matter. I don't know about you, but you've probably seen this kind of an image before about the idea that we're all on this mountain, we're all on different paths and stuff like that. If you want to put that first one up, and then we just kind of walk through this. So whenever I meet with somebody, when we first met with people, and here in Merrillville, we just sit down and I literally would buy people cups of coffee and just talk about faith and Jesus, and spent a lot of time at Starbucks, a lot of time at other places. And I realized I couldn't get into like the in-depth stuff, so I had to learn how to take the truths and the real like conversational things and draw them into what I call napkin theology. And so this is one of those things that we talk about. They'd be like, well, isn't all faith going up the same mountain? And so we've all probably seen this or heard this analogy before. And so what I like to do is I would draw this whole thing out, and then I flip it upside down. And here's why. Because I don't think we're all on the same path and ending at the same spot. I think we're starting at the same spot, but we're going to end differently. Here's why. Here's what I mean by that. This world is a dangerous world. All the way back to prehistoric stuff, all the way like ancient humans, we've realized this is a dangerous world. And because it's dangerous, we're afraid of it, and we have fear. And when we have fear, what do we try to do? Control it. We try to protect ourselves, we try to control our environment, and all of that. Because it's dangerous, we're afraid, and because we're afraid, we want to control it. And so we create systems in place to say, how do we actually control all these things? And this is where world religions come into play. When you have a drought, what do you do if you're in the ancient world and you think the gods control everything about your livestock, your rainfall and all that? You make sacrifices to those gods or that goddesses, right? And so you do all that. You try to prepare. You try to, like, when you plant the seed, you're sacrificing all these things and all this. And so, you're trying to manipulate and to control things because this world's a dangerous place and you want to make sure you're taken care of, right? And so you have this vicious cycle. So I don't think we're going up there on the same mountain, we're going to end at the same spot. I think we're starting at the same spot and we're going to end in different places. The God that you find in different religions is not the same God you find in the Bible, right? And different gods and all this other things. But the reason that we've come up with these systems and all this, and by the way, we now just have different titles for these things. Have you noticed this? Like the recession-proof way of living your life, and like all these random things. Like you should have 5 years of food supply in your garage and all this other stuff. Like, yeah, you should prepare, but do you need 5 years worth of stuff? I'm not sure, right? And if those cans have been expired for 10 years, just throw them away, because that's weird. When I show up to my relative's house and they have these bunkers, basically, I'm like, seriously, dude, like you need to step away from whatever news channel you're watching. But like some of us do this, right? Or we have these like the best way to advance your career. Why do you need to advance your career? Why? Because you want to control it. You want to make sure that you're the one in charge of all these things. So the ancient world may have been like this, but we have the same ideology behind it. We just change it differently. And the way we approach God or Jesus during the season is completely influenced by prepositions as well. And so I don't know about you, Betsy just asked me, are you going to play the Schoolhouse Rock next week? I'm going to find it. This week I was a little busy, so we're going to show what prepositions are based on Schoolhouse Rock, right? And so, but I remember this, the illustration my teacher, whoever it was, probably Miss Van Vector, in 4th grade said, it's about a squirrel and a tree. I don't know if you've ever heard this before, but the way that the squirrel can be on the tree, in the tree, over the tree, all that, that's the idea of prepositions for me. And so, we're going to look at different ways that people have approached interacting with Jesus based on prepositions, and we're going to see if we miss out on it. I think the best example that we can find for the Christmas story is a story that Jesus himself taught or shared. One day he was talking and he's trying to give an example of what grace is and what the kingdom of heaven is like, and he's talking with a bunch of different people. He talks about a lost coin, he talks about some other like lost sheep, and then he ends it with this one major story we call the prodigal son, which I think we've mislabeled. I don't have time to get into why we've mislabeled it, but it is what it is. And so Jesus tells the story that in this culture, the younger son goes to the father, who's pretty wealthy, and he says, hey, Dad, I want my inheritance now. And so the father, who lovingly does this, gives him the inheritance. Now, it doesn't take rocket science. In inheritance, when do you normally inherit something? That person dies. So what's the younger son telling the father? You're dead to me. This would have been shocking to the community, the original audience. We don't necessarily understand it because we don't live in an honor-shame culture. We're in Western world, we're not in the Eastern world, and 2022 is not the same as the century, right? So there's some cultural differences there going on. But when Jesus was telling this story, there would have been a gasp in this moment. And especially when the father said, yeah, let's do this. He divides the inheritance, he gives it to him. And the younger son goes off to this foreign land and he just squanders away his stuff. He buys prostitutes, he's doing all this other stuff, he's having parties, and then a drought hits. And then he hires himself out to be a hired hand on a farm. And he's sitting there and he's just feeding the pigs, which, by the way, like a Jewish person feeding pigs is like, it would have been scandalous when Jesus said that. And so he's looking at this saying, man, my father's hired hands eat better than this. So he starts his way back. And he starts his speech on the way back. I don't know if you've ever been in trouble and you have to go confess something. And you want to make sure you get that speech down correctly, right? Like I remember one time I was going to have to tell my mom something. And I remember I'm going to do my very best to shed a tear at this moment, right? Like, and I was like trying and I just couldn't do it. I just could not figure out how to do it. And so she saw right through. No, but we've all probably been in those scenarios, right? When you've really screwed up, and now you've got to confess it, and you've got to somehow build these bridges. And this is what the younger son does. And so he walks back, and he's going back to the father, and he's saying, like, he's rehearsing this whole thing. God, or Father, I don't even deserve to be like this. I've sinned against you in heaven. I've done all this other stuff. And can you just hire me back as a hired hand? Right? And so he's rehearsing this, and he's walking, and the father is watching from his property. And he sees this younger son from a long way off. And the father does something that was scandalous in his own right as well. He picks up his tunic and he starts running. An older gentleman would have never ran in this culture. Gentlemen with wealth and gentlemen with honor and prestige, they walk, they almost glide through the crowds. They would have never put effort into running. Servants run, slaves run. Those are people in a hurry. They rush because I can walk. Does that make sense? Like, that's the mentality here. So here's this father just running after the younger son, and he embraces him. And the younger son's trying to get this speech out. And the dad's like, screw it, no. Put the ring on, give him a robe, probably take a bath because you stink like a pig, all that. But then we're going to kill this fattened calf, we're going to throw the party, right? And so that's what he has his servants do. And so he does this, and as the party's going on, the older son comes in. And he hears like this party music and all this other stuff, and he asks the servant, what's going on? And the servant's like, hey, your younger son, your younger brother's back. And so your dad decided to throw a party. And because of all of that going on, the older son is like so mad. He's like, I'm not even going in. So the father comes out to the older son. And he said, dude, your brother was dead, he was lost, but now he's found, all this other stuff. We had to celebrate. And he's like, I'm not doing it. I've done everything you've ever asked for me to do, and you've never given me even a goat. I don't know what you're going to do with a goat, or whatever, right? And so this older son is like kicking a feet, he's throwing a little fit. He's like, I want a goat, Daddy, and you never gave me a goat, right? And so all of a sudden, here we are. And so we're going to look at this, and I think this epitomizes how we look at God during, especially the holiday season. For me, what we see is four postures that Christians or people exploring faith can look at how we view God. And the older son looks at him from a different thing. We'll talk about him next week. The younger son is looked at the posture of he thinks he's over the father. He doesn't need the father at all. That he can just interact with him however he wants to. He can tell the father, hey, I don't need you and your rules. I don't need anything like this. But both sons miss the gift that the father's offering. Both sons miss it. It's obvious in the younger son. It's not so obvious in the older son. It's not so obvious there. But what we end up doing here is we just look for these four postures. One is over, one is under, the other one is for, and the other one is from God. How we actually interact with God matters. And the gift that the Father is offering in the parable that Jesus tells is the same gift that God is offering us at the Christmas story. That God actually wants to do life with us. He doesn't want us to be under or over or for or from, but to be with. In this Christmas season, I'm just going to encourage you, learn how to do life with God. And the younger son, man, he just screws this whole thing up, and it's fairly obvious. The older son can get away and looks nice and clean and crisp. And from the outside, you got it all figured out, right? But from the inside, it's not necessarily the case. And so, if we were to ask, like, what is the gift of Christmas? What would you actually answer? Christ, Jesus, all that, right? For most of my life, I've always answered so I get out of hell and go to heaven. I've always answered it that way. I don't know why, but for whatever reason, that's how the gospel, the message of Jesus has always been portrayed. I want my ticket out of hell. And I just want to go spend my time with Jesus, the pearly gates and golden streets and all that kind of stuff, right? And so what I've learned over the last few years or so is that the gospel itself, the message of heaven is not really the end goal, but to be with Christ is. And that's why he shows up. Whenever we approach it through a religious system, what we're trying to do is we're trying to control God so that he does what we want him to do. We're going to go through certain situations, like a vending machine. You guys remember these old school vending machines where you put your dollar in and then you press in a letter and a number? Some of you are like, what's that? Look it up, we'll find one. Step outside of Amazon Prime, all that kind of stuff, right? Like there's other ways of getting things, right? And so you'd have to fight with that little dollar and all that. And so this is kind of how religion works. That we show up and we do our thing, and then God gives us what we want. And it makes us feel good. So what do? Constantly do? We do more of the same rituals. We expect more of the same return. And the cycle continues. And then when it doesn't repeat itself, other people chime in. Maybe your faith isn't big enough. Maybe you just need more sacrifice, more whatever. You fill in the blank, right? That's how the world religion approaches this whole concept. Even parts of Christianity will say that. these veins of Christianity kind of say, well, this is how it all works. And so for us, man, I just realized that we could easily look into how we just approach these next few weeks, especially the Christmas season, and say, Jesus, how can I approach this to be with you? How can I show up to my workplace and be with you? How can I do these next however many days? I don't know how many days you have in Christmas. It's on our Christmas website, but I don't know what it says. Probably 10 or so, whatever it is now. I don't know. We just have to constantly use. If we've been following Jesus and we don't find the joy of following Jesus, maybe we should check our motives. Maybe instead of saying, God, I want these gifts from you, these things from you, am I actually going to experience life with you? And I'm not saying that Christianity should be all pie in the sky and happy clappy crap like that, but there should be moments of joy. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
There should be moments where you're like, yeah, I can actually experience this. Even in the depths and the sadness and the struggles of life, you should still experience some kind of joy. Happiness and joy are not the same thing, by the way. And so we need to understand that. I got to have an up-close personal example from this from my older sister, Marie, who just always spent, we had a great relationship. She basically, my mom worked 3 to 4 jobs because my dad wasn't around. And so Marie's 6 years older than me, so she would basically raise us. If Marie told me not to do something, I usually listened to her. When my mom told me not to do something, I just went out and did it anyway, because I was like, what are you going to do, right? So Marie and I had this good relationship, and I just got to watch her and kind of model certain things. Marie had suffered miscarriages, and just the way that she would handle that response to it, or the time after it, was just amazing. And so she would say these things. She would be like, I want to go spend time with my daddy, which does not mean our earthly dad. She was going to a room and she was going to literally spend a day, 2 days, whatever it would be, and just pray and be with God and hang out with him for a while, doing whatever she had. And I had no clue what she did. But then she had 4 or 5 other kids at that time, so she would come out and she would hang out with her family and stuff like that and provide. And then even towards the end of her life with terminal cancer, just watching her just not want to be with God so that she could get healed, but want to just be with God. The last 48 hours, last 72 hours of her life, just watching her just sit on this couch with my dad. That's how she would talk. And I remember the last time I talked to her, she was like, I'm just mad. I just want to heal, but I also want to be with my dad.
Yeah.
And I get a glimpse on this earth, but I get the bigger picture whenever I leave here. And up to that moment, I was just like, oh, okay. I'm watching you not walk with God so you get healed, but walk with God just to be with God. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And a lot of times we could easily approach Jesus as he's the treasure map. Instead of
He's the treasure.
he's the actual treasure.
That's good.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
What if we actually approach Jesus as God, you're the gift.
Yeah.
And if we get that beat drum, if we get, the nutcrackers and the guitar and get all this other stuff. I remember the Nintendo, original Nintendo was our Christmas gift. My brother and I had to share it. And then the whole family had to share this one TV. And so it was the best Christmas gift ever because my brother and I outvoted my sisters because they couldn't beat us up. And so we could play this whole time. And then I think we had it for a year and a half. And then my brother and I had this challenge. This is the whole side note, by the way. And we had this challenge. We were going to play Mike Tyson's Punch Out. And we're going to do is see as long as we could go into the whole progress without getting knocked down. Not beat, but knocked down. And I was at the time fighting Mike Tyson with whatever that character is. And my sister Stephanie came out with a hammer and bashed the Nintendo. Because we had consumed the TV for days. And she was like, I want to watch a soap opera. And I was like, I almost beat Mike Tyson. But anyway, so that was the end of it there. So she's also stabbed me in the back with a knife. It's fine. So, as a gift, Stephanie gave Heather a pair of knives, or set of knives, and said, just in case you need it. And she wasn't talking about food. So, that was awesome. Now I have to find myself in my notes. So, all right. So, if we look at the Christmas story, we easily can see an example of life over God. Whenever you see, and so Paul looking back into the Christmas story, he says this in Galatians, he says, the fullness of time, God sends Christ as the gift, right? He sends him in there, and he wants to redeem and restore and all this other stuff. And so think about this. He sends Christ as the gift in the fullness of time. I don't know if you've ever tried to think through, like, how do you actually get something, right? Like, something new. And so if you break it down, you have 3 phases of this. The first phase is that you're dreaming and you're thinking about it and stuff like that. Carson is in the process of trying to buy his first car. And so he is in the dreaming stage. He is looking at every app. Every time he's in the car, he's looking through apps. He's like, man, can I afford this one? Do you think this is a good car? All this other stuff. He's in that dreaming stage. If you bought your first car, you know what that process is like, right? You don't want to waste your money, but you know you can't get a brand new car, so you're looking for a decent first car that you don't have to like literally hold together with duct tape and rubber bands and stuff like that, right? So that's what he's in. He's looking at this process. He's dreaming about it. Think about any other process that you thought through. How do you dream about it? What does it look like? And all that. And then the second phase of this is where he's going to acquire it. He doesn't have the money he needs right now to buy a car, so he's working a job to save the money so that at one point he can do this and he's going to purchase it, right? And then, what if he just bought it and then he put it in our driveway? Is that actually experiencing the gift? Not really, right? So the next part of this is the experiential part, where you actually interact with it. My mother-in-law has like 4 sets of pans and plates because she doesn't want to overuse them. And I'm like, this is a lot of mental space for you, right? When it comes to pans, like I'll go try to go cook something, and she's like, oh, don't use those pans. Those are too pretty. And I'm like, isn't that the point of whatever, it's your house, right? Like, so it is what it is, right? But some of us, we buy these things, we dream about it, we buy it, but then we put it away. We don't actually experience it, right? God himself dreamt of the day that he would be with us. Since Genesis 3, we've screwed this good earth up. We unleashed evil in our action of sin. We thought we could do this whole life without, just like the younger prodigal son. We thought we could do this life without him, and so we did all this. And so God put in a plan to get his good earth back. We are part of that good earth. So he dreamt about it, and then he paid the price we could never pay. At the fullness of time, Christ was sent to this earth, and as a baby, he exemplifies everything cute and fuzzy and all that, and bubbly that we all feel about it. But at some point, he's going to end up on the cross. He's going to pay the price that we could never pay. His blood will be shed to cover the sins and forgive us and remove the sins from us as well. And he's going to save us from the wages of sin, which is death and hell and all of that. But he's going to save us to life with him. And it just happens to be in heaven, right? And so he's going to save us to that. And so part of that process is he's going to experience life with us. And this is part of that process we do. When you look at the Christmas story and you see the words of the fullness of time meant that Israel is being ruled by Rome by this puppet king called King Herod, or Herod the Great. Herod the Great thought he was over God as well. He did not think he had to answer to God at all. This is why he has no qualms about literally killing every 2-year-old or younger in Bethlehem. Because he just did it. What's the big point? Right? So when you read through that story, that's one glimpse. All the original audience would have had to do is read that and say, oh, Herod the Great. Herod the Great is a guy who overtaxed him to the point where he had enough resources that he redirected in this place called Masada. He redirected, which is a hanging fortress. He redirected all of the water for 100 miles so that when the flash floods happened, it would all hang out and just flow down into Masada. He had over 4 million gallons of water in the middle of the desert so he could last for 10 years on this mountain. In first century time. Does that make sense? He also wanted a mountain where there wasn't a mountain. He said, well, God, you didn't make the mountain, so I'm going to put this mountain here. And he called it Herodium. If you want to throw the picture, it's like the aerial. Yep. And so here's Herodium. When Jesus is with his disciples in Jerusalem, you can see Herodium. I was there and I saw it. This is like big, prior to any trucks and stuff like that. He builds this mountain. I think when Jesus is looking at saying, hey, if you have faith in mustard seed, you can tell this mountain to go and throw itself in the sea, he's looking at Herodium. He built this castle up there so that if you ever had to flee, he would hang out there and he'd be there. Mark Antony, when he's in Egypt and he's that whole thing with Cleopatra and all that, Mark Antony flees and he goes to Herodium. This is the relationship that he had here with Herod the Great and stuff like that. Herod the Great was this fascinating person because he's on the edge of the Roman Empire. Israel itself is like this neutral territory in a sense. The people of Israel didn't really care about Rome. They also really didn't care about the other empire called the Parthian Empire. And so these two empires would fight over Israel. The reason they would fight over Israel is because it controlled the trade routes that connected 3 different continents. And so Herod the Great always thought, oh, I have to protect myself. The world's a dangerous place. There's a lot of enemies. He got afraid from it, so he learned how to control it. He created all these systems to help control everything around him. And so when the Magi come from the east, they're coming from the Parthian Empire. This is why it throws everybody in Jerusalem in an uproar. These enemy people, or people from the enemy states, are coming in there and they're saying, hey, where's this king that was just born? It throws everybody into this uproar. Herod the Great controlled majority of all this trade routes, and so he could tax it, he could do whatever. He also had this plant, and this is fascinating to learn ourselves in Israel in May, but he had this plant that he was only like created, or whatever you call it, grown in Israel, and it was a plant that was the pre-Viagra, I'll put it that way. And so wealthy Romans would literally pay thousands of millions of dollars for a pound of this stuff. And they would export it everywhere they could throughout the Roman Empire. All to whatever. You know what I mean? So there's that. So these people are dealing with it, and he's like, dude, if you're willing to pay for it, I'll sell it to you whatever price I want. Right? So here's that. And so he's doing all this, and he would just look at this and say, okay, God, if you didn't redirect all the water routes that I want, I'm going to. If you didn't put the mountain there, I will. This king is born, I'll just kill all the 2-year-olds that are under. Because I'm over you. I don't need you. We have a generation that likes to rewrite natural ways of life. You didn't create me this way, I want to be created this way. You didn't do this, and there is part that we get to create, we get to like explore, we get to do all this other stuff, but you don't get to rewrite the whole history and stuff like that. That's part of this process. If we want to look at the life under God, all we have to do is look to 2010. There's this guy named Steve Johnson, and he was in a playoff game. It was the Buffalo Bills and the Pittsburgh Pirates, the Pittsburgh Steelers, and they're playing, and it was a game-winning catch that Steve Johnson had in his hands in the end zone, and he drops it. And here's the tweet he puts out there. He says, I worship you for 24/7, which, did you really worship God 24/7? Probably not, but we're not going to get into that, right? And he says, this is how you do me, right? You expect me to learn from this how? I'll never forget this, ever. Thanks, though. He blames God for dropping the ball. What his mentality is, God, I do everything I can to follow you, and you can't even bless me. We would never blame God this much, right? Or this publicly. We would never say, God, I've done everything right, and I still lost my job, and it has to be your fault. Somehow you're punishing me. God, I've done all of these things, and I still have this disease. God, what am I doing wrong? I'm doing all these things. I'm worshiping, I'm tithing, I'm showing up, and I'm doing all the ritual loops and all this other stuff. I'm putting my life under your law, under your wealth, under like way of life. And what am I expecting? Good things and everything up and to the right. And to win a playoff game, right? This is the life under God. This is a little bit more tricky to identify with and say, okay, God, am I missing this? Because God doesn't want us to be under him or over him. He wants to be with us. That's the gift of Christmas. So as we approach this, I just want you to encourage you. Don't try to be under, don't try to be over God. Yeah. Learn how to be with God. And if you're that prodigal son where you said, screw you, God, I don't need you, this is why he sent Jesus. So that he could be with you. That was my story. I just said, I don't really need you. I'm just going to do life on my own. And all of a sudden at 17, God was like, no, let's do this together. And from that moment on, it's not been perfect or anything. But any job that I've had, I've wanted to wake up and say, God, here I am. I don't know what kind of job I'm going to do today, but can I just do this with you? Can I just experience life with you as I show up and I do this thing or go through whatever it is? Even down to when I was cleaning toilets when I was in college. I was like, God, I want to do this with you and see how I can glorify you in this moment. It's very challenging to learn how to glorify God as you're cleaning the crap off of a toilet. Because some other adult couldn't figure out how to clean that up. Right? It was worse when I worked at other jobs, I'm like, seriously, like, God, I don't know how I'm gonna like partner with you to do this. When we started our church here, I would sit down with people and sit across the coffee shops and stuff at the table of coffee shops, and I'd say, hey, I don't know, because we had to raise money to get here. It wasn't just like, it wasn't like a lottery ticket that I won. It was like, yes, let's go do this. Well, so I'd raise money, and I would raise money with people saying, hey, I have no clue what God has in store for like people in Merrillville and stuff like that. But I do know that God is calling us there to partner with God in whatever He's doing. So whatever He has in store for us, I think you should be part of it too. And just take your money right now and stuff like that. And so we exist now because people did that. People were like, absolutely, here's a check, $20,000. Here's a check, $5. You know what I mean? Like, and it was like, okay, God, we're partnering with the wide scheme of things. And just saying, God, we're so blessed that you want to partner, and you're drawing people to partner with you. And if you could just look at it and say, God, I want to partner with you in this season. And I want to do life with you, whatever that means. And say, and when I show up to this job, God, I don't want to do it for you, I don't want to do it from you, I want to do it with you. I want to walk the halls, whatever this job is. I'm going to sit at my desk, and God, I want to just live life and work with you. Not so that I can create my own empire, but I can advance your kingdom with my efforts. It's not going to be easy. It's going to be completely countercultural. But this is the gift that God offers to us. And if you're searching that, what does it look like to do life with you and with God and all this? It starts with us admitting our sins. It starts with us admitting that we actually need saved from something. And so we confess our sins to God. It starts with believing that Jesus is who the Bible says He is. And then we commit our ways to His life. It doesn't mean that everything in your life is going to be perfect and all up to the right. It just starts the journey. But it changes how we view things and how we explore. We're going to pray. I know Lisa, we're also going to lead us in worship, and then we'll wrap up the service. God, thanks for this day. Thanks for who you are. God, thanks for everything you've done for us. And God, for some of us, we may think that we are over you, that we don't actually need to follow you. And the reality of it is, God, that you've set systems in place. And the universe is ran by the rules and the systems that you've put in place, and we cannot actually challenge that. The harsh reality of humanity is we actually can't create anything. We can reproduce things and we can put certain things together, but we're not taking something out of nothing and creating something new. There's absolutely no way to be over you. So God, would you change our hearts and our mindsets towards you? And if any of us here are just running and fleeing and just trying to get away from you, God, would you just open our eyes to see where you're moving and open our ears to see how you've blessed us? And God, for some of us, we're just trying to live life and just be under you. And we're going to do everything we possibly can so that we can control the outcome and just get you to do whatever we need you to do to bless us. God, would you watch over us? Would you challenge our hearts? Would you soften our hearts? And help us to stop trying to manipulate you. But just to be with you. Help us not to miss the gift that you're offering this Christmas season. Help us to do life with you. And to stay in step with you. We love you, Jesus. So you can pray this. Amen.
All things have passed away. Your love has stayed the same. Your constant grace remains the cornerstone. And things that we thought were dead are breathing in life again. You caused your sun to shine on darkest nights. Let's sing that again, church. All things have passed away. Your love has stayed the same. Your constant grace remains the cornerstone. And things that we thought were dead are breathing in life again. You cause your sun to shine on darkest nights. For all that you've done, we will pour out our love. This will be our anthem song. Jesus, we love you. Oh, how we love you. You are the one our hearts adore. The hopeless have found their hope. The orphans now have a hope. And all that was lost has found its place in you. And you lift our weary head. You make us strong instead. You took these rags and made us beautiful. For all that you've done, we will pour out our love. This will be our anthem song. Jesus, we love you. Let it rise. Oh, how we love you. You are the one our hearts adore. Sing Jesus, Jesus, we love you. Oh, how we love you. You are the one our hearts adore. We adore you. Our hearts adore you, Jesus. Our hearts adore. Our hearts adore. We adore you, Jesus. We're so glad you're with us, Lord. Oh, there's no place we'd rather be than in your presence, Jesus. In your presence, Jesus. Wanna be where you are. Wanna be where you are. Our affection, our devotion, poured out on the feet of Jesus. Our affection, our devotion, poured out on the feet of Jesus. Our affection, our devotion poured out on the feet of Jesus. Our affection, our devotion poured out on your feet. Jesus, we love you. Oh, how we love you. You are the one God. Our hearts adore. Sing Jesus, Jesus, we love you. Yes, we do, God. Oh, how we love you. You are the one God. Our hearts adore. Let's sing that again. Jesus, we love you. Oh, how we love you. You are the one our hearts adore. One more time to say, Jesus, we love you. Oh, how we love you. You are the one our hearts adore.
God, we come before you and we just want to acknowledge that we adore you. And like the shepherds, we have nothing to offer but just to be in your presence. We have no gift. We just want to acknowledge that we're in here with you. We just want to worship you. We love you, Jesus. To you we pray this. Amen. As we wrap up, if you need prayer for anything, I'd love to meet with you back at the green wall and pray with you. Just as we leave, let's just leave in an attitude of worship. If you have any conversations, let's have it in the hallway. If you're new here with us, we'd love to connect with you at guest services right across the hall by the gingerbread house, by the way. And so we have a gift for you. We'd love to connect with you as well. Church, I hope you know this is true that God loves you, and I love you, and so we follow him and we count on the best he has to offer for us. So let's go. Be the church. Have a great week. See you next Sunday.